Sammy Masterson. Oh! Oh! Hello!
Well, I'll do that again. Hello!
You should have called me.
It just came in.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today, I'm joined by Kal Vepuri, who is an investor and also founder and CEO of Hero, which is an IoT-enabled medication management service. Welcome to the show today.
Hi, how are you? Thanks, Scott, for having me. Excited to speak with you.
Well, Kal, I know you've been very active in investing as an angel, and you've invested in some 175 startups. Can you talk about your interest and also kind of give us a little bit of insights in terms of some of your due diligence lens?
Sure. Yeah. So I started angel investing back in 2010 in a small way, and over time started investing more and more as I learned a little bit more about my own investing style just through experimentation and getting to know folks on the West Coast and the East Coast. I started on the East Coast and then started spending a bunch of time in the Bay Area and got to know the communities there. In terms of how I decided to invest and the criterion, had to learn that as well. In the early days, it was by talking to folks who I knew who were entrepreneurs themselves, folks who I'd worked with in the past, and got increasingly excited about angel investing in a more full-time fashion once I realized there was all different types of entrepreneurs in the technology world, folks who had operational backgrounds, folks who were engineers, folks who had more business and services backgrounds themselves or marketers. And as I sort of started to understand the diversity of backgrounds that went into investing and building companies, the thing that started to make the most sense to me was what is the fit between this individual or groups of individuals, meaning the founders themselves, and the idea or the market that they're going after. So this is obviously now commonly known as founder market or founder product fit, and something that's widely talked about. But to me, it was sort of the foundation around all of my investing activities. There was never a time when I ever really looked at a company without sort of thinking about that as 99% of the decision maker. Obviously, the rest of the items or issues that people often think about in terms of size of the market, growth of the market, et cetera, were important. But oftentimes, some great entrepreneurs are building companies that have no market at all, right? In the sense that they're just they're creating sort of the future in a true sense. Obviously, Elon Musk is one of the folks that comes to mind when you think of those types of founders. So, in reality, it could just be a passion and a real excitement for how things should be versus how they are today. And if a founder or a group of founders really exhibit that passion and have the skill set to accomplish the things they say they want to do, and sort of put forward some compelling evidence that they can do it, then usually that would be a good sign to me.
Yeah, what's interesting as I'm listening is this notion of fit in multiple fashion. Is that certainly is the market attractive, but then the real question is, are they the right people to go into that market, and are they the most likely to succeed? So you could have really talented people, but if they're not a great fit for the market that they're tackling, that's not a great fit. Which brings me back to the topic at hand, which is Hero. But I want to go back to the story behind that. I know there's a personal story that deals with your mother. I wonder if you could share that with us.
Absolutely, yeah. So Hero is a company that started as an idea, and the idea came to light back in 2013. Was when my mother started to suffer from a number of different chronic disease challenges that she was having. She's a physician herself, and actually, in some ways, almost exclusively was focused on geriatrics. She was caring for seniors primarily at the time, and as she struggled with that, I started to understand that taking medication correctly and at the right times and in the right forms was a complicated challenge. You have to think about where are the meds? Do you have inventory of all of them? Are they expired or not? In the event that they're things that you have to take more ad hoc. Is your payment information up to date for refills? Can you get the refill easily through some variety of pharmacy sources? Are there drug interactions? Are they the right dosage, et cetera, et cetera? And when you have multiple prescribing physicians, that makes it even more complicated because you have different sources of sort of truth in terms of what you should be taking and at what times. And so that was all new information to me in the sense that I've been blessed to be a relatively healthy person. And so seeing that from my mother's perspective, who, again, a physician herself, was really eye-opening. And then, unfortunately, not too long after kind of just starting to experience that through her lens, she had a heart attack and unfortunately had to get a quadruple bypass procedure done. And obviously, that was an incredibly traumatic experience for her and for our family, an incredibly challenging one to go through. And it's one that, unfortunately, a growing number of families in this country are having to go through as a result of an increasing incidence of disease, particularly heart disease itself. And so after that, thankfully, she had an incredible recovery. She had an incredible care team and physician and surgical team. She had a complete recovery after what was a very complex procedure with a lot of complications. Our expectation is that she'd be able to go back into her own sort of steady state life, which was spending time with her family, working, and being a clinician herself, seeing her patients. Unfortunately, in the few years that she began doing that, she had a few events where she missed her medication or didn't take her medication appropriately, and that caused hospital readmissions, which could have gone really poorly. Thankfully, they didn't. And again, she had great care and she was able to recover completely. But that was an unnecessary and avoidable trauma, again, on her and something that would have been completely avoidable had Hero existed. And so at that point forward, I started spending more and more time on sort of the project of managing medication and what that really meant and why it was such a complicated problem and why it hadn't been solved yet, at least for what we call the sort of super users, the 5% of the population that drive 50% of all healthcare utilization and cost. These are individuals who are what we call polypharmacy, polychronic patients. So they take many medications. They have multiple chronic conditions, typically have multiple prescribing physicians, and they usually require some support from a family caregiver or some other sort of group of third-party caregivers who could be paid or other loved ones in order for them to manage their overall health and sort of live to their full potential. And what we found was in that process, or myself and some other colleagues who started to become interested in this project itself, was that many of the tools and resources that were available for managing these sorts of problems were either really effective for the 95% of the population that drove the other 50% of utilization, meaning the healthier sort of 95%, or they were basically pushed onto this 5% population, and as a result, all of the friction points in it were made in those solutions made these individuals not want to actually use the products themselves. So, when you think about, the types of things that are out there, there's blister packs, there's unit dose packaging. These are all really effective for certain, really effective point solutions, but there was nothing holistic enough that actually worked for this large and incredibly high risk population in a way that made them love it and want to use it, 2, 3, 4 times a day regularly, and continue to do that over the course of oftentimes the rest of their life. And so we went about this process of developing some ideas, putting them in front of these individuals, and really sort of developing the product in partnership with the folks who would be our eventual members. And that was something that ended up working for us. It took countless years just to do that member development or patient development work, and that was just the beginning. And then we had to go and develop hardware to actually do the things that they needed to be done, and then build software on top of it to add all of the transparency and the notifications and the data pieces that a caregiver would want when it comes to understanding whether or not their loved one was taking their medication appropriately all the time.
Yeah, so I think you covered quite a bit there, and I think just to kind of take a step back is that this category isn't new, right? This category has been tackled by many different startups, and you've had things that have sensors at the bottle cap level to the different types of dispensers. I don't know how many, drug compliance, medicine dispensers that I've come across over the years. But I think one of the things that you said that's really spot on is really spending the time, even if it's years, to properly understand this particular segment that you're talking about. And I know, because my mother is one of those people that take handfuls of medication throughout the day, and to compound that, because oftentimes maybe they're living on their own, it gets really complicated, and they're not necessarily the most tech savvy people. I remember actually sending my mother over the holidays a electronic device where it was meant for voice over internet protocol with a video capability, and we removed all possible applications, and she managed to get it to work with a neighbor, and then after that it never worked again because she didn't know how to use it. So this notion of insights that you gain from potential members, what were some of the key insights that really kind of made that user experience that's that much more sticky? And then you mentioned the different layers of the hardware stack, the software stack, the firmware, and of course everything else that's surrounding it. And also talk about this notion of the network, right? So you have the care receiver, but then the caregiver, there's multiple stakeholders that's involved in that kind of network, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, absolutely. So I'll start with the first part of the question. The foundation of what we do is we're trying to change behavior from what's natural for most people, right? We are not evolved to take medication at certain times a day, every day. That's not part of our fabric as humans. So we have to instill behavior change to get that to happen, and then we have to reinforce it continually for many people the rest of their life, unfortunately. And to do that requires the removal of friction, right? Anytime there is friction in a process, it makes a human want to do it less, right? It's pretty simple. It's sort of a generally understood part of user experience and designing systems for humans. And so what we tried to do is remove the friction points that we saw as the most detrimental for getting people to take their medication. So that means that we had to minimize the need for configuration. We had to make it incredibly open as a system. So no matter how you got your medication or what type of medication you were taking, it was a simple and easy configuration. And then after it's configured, it has to be effectively a push button experience, which is what Hero is. The system is a push button experience. It's very easy to use. People enjoy using it. They start to basically form this sort of bond with the product that's in their home, and then should they choose to interact with everything else that's in the ecosystem, which many of our members do, and certainly our caregivers all do, because they're interacting through the app largely to ensure that they have the transparency that they want to feel peace of mind around the members' daily medication related activities. So, we built the system to minimize configuration, automate dispensing, requiring no pre-sorting whatsoever, minimize the number of refills so it has enough capacity to last for up to 90 days in many cases, if not most cases. It stores enough medication for the majority of individuals who are in the polychronic polypharmacy space. And if it doesn't for those individuals, or you have medication that's not solid oral dose pills, you can still include them in the regimen and hero both on the device as well as through any of the digital solutions that caregivers have or the members are choosing to use themselves. You're still reminded and asked to confirm whether or not you've taken your medication. So everything is comprehensive, holistic, and easy to use.
So, I'm thinking about an Israeli startup called Intuition Robotics, and they're taking a different approach, in terms of using an interactive robot. Again, it's one of the key functions, of course, is drug compliance, but it's also around just, movement and healthy lifestyle. But it's notion of interactivity and then getting to know that elderly senior citizen, again, more specific to those that are living alone. And I think, one of the things that was quite interesting is this notion of bond. And you mentioned bond with this system as well. But this system is really not interacting with them per se, right? So I'm curious, again, at the end of the day, the hardest part is not only removing the friction, but also changing behavior. Now, a robot is more likely to say, hey, Jane, it's time to take your medication. That'll get you, let's get that taken care of. And then you could go see your friend, for a game of cards or something like that. So how are you actually tackling the habit portion in terms of developing new habits?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we focus squarely on medication management, which is an incredibly complex, multi-layered problem. And the reason we do that is because not only do studies show this, countless studies prove that when you are able to empower a chronic disease patient to take control of their life and feel like they are not subhuman, but rather like everyone else, someone who's perfectly healthy, and give them the tools to operate in that fashion, their behavior improves naturally. They become more social, they become more open to social engagement, they seek out social engagement, and they actually engage socially. And that is, again, because they feel like everyone else, right? In a positive way. They're able to operate their life with the freedom and independence that all of us crave and love. And so what we try to do is handle this very difficult, unfun, and challenging problem in a way that makes it seamless and ultimately has it have it be a holistic sort of warm blanket for them, that's managing all of this in the background, except when it needs to engage you to take your meds, right? And so it does that with audible and visual notifications. It does that through all of our digital channels, through SMS and text if we need to, or phone calls if we need to, depending on the individual and the caregiver and what they choose to be the right approach. But ultimately, again, once it's all configured, it becomes very, very seamless. And the reason why people form that relationship with it is because they appreciate what it does for them. And that inherently gives them the flexibility to engage with their family members and not talk about medication, right? Not spend, hours on Sunday filling out pill boxes, and then having someone, question whether or not they took the right medications because parts of the pill box are still not taken. It just creates this layer of ease and convenience, and ultimately that leads to happiness, which is what ultimately drives the most behavior change that can see. You can in our population certainly is increasing independence and therefore increasing happiness.
Yeah, so certainly, I think from a user experience, I think you guys are definitely hitting some of the big points. And I'm curious in terms of long-term sustained adoption. Also, the network of caregivers also play an important role. So, you're just mentioning family members, for instance. Of course, they get the notification, they have the visibility into the dashboards and so forth. But how is a system designed in such a way that it creates kind of reinforcing behavior so that there is, in fact, true compliance all the way through, whether it's from a loved one or through a primary physician or caregiver like a nurse, for instance?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we today we immediately engage with caregivers when a hero member is onboarded, and caregivers are kind of looped into the process of what we call our first run experience. Thereafter, they're continually engaged through getting notifications if someone hasn't taken their medications, or if somebody's running low on inventory and haven't already engaged a refill cycle. If we see a pattern of change in how medication is being taken by an individual, we will engage caregivers, again, in a way that's thoughtful, actionable, and not sort of creating some sort of notification distress, right? We try to ensure that everything we're doing is in a lighthearted fashion and gets ahead of the curve of any potential risks or challenges that actually happen with respect to someone's health. We put safety first, and then we take that and try to engage people in a way that makes the experience as fun and engaging as possible. So that's sort of what you would see if you were to be a hero member or a caregiver today. Many of our roadmap items include deeper integration with all the various health stakeholders out there when it comes to a specific patient's care and health outcomes. And so as we think about the future, we are working on and already testing, and in many cases already performing more services that deeply integrate with those various types of stakeholders. And we'll talk more about that in the future. But and as we do that, to your point, the goal is to create a sense of data objectivity and continuity and contiguousness across all of those different stakeholders, so that everyone has accurate, objective, real-time information, not just with respect to medication, because we see vitamins over the counter, cash pay, and claims-based RX in terms of what's actually being taken on the front line on a per med per dose basis. We also are able to see how that over time, particularly when we're partnered with other stakeholders, how that affects readmissions, utilization of various health services, positive or negative, biometrics, all the different exciting sort of adjacencies to in-home care and care management and disease management. And so we want to facilitate that and create a set of data and information that has never existed before, so that everything can work together in a more seamless and more beneficial manner, so that ultimately our members are healthier and live to their full potential.
All right, so we're kind of running out of time. So my last question for you is around, at the onset, we talked about fit and the importance of fit. We've seen, startups in this category that have tried to approach it from, let's say, selling more into the hospital or the physicians, or in some cases through the insurance, for instance. Here,
Mhm.
it's a direct purchase, and I'm wondering, who's actually making the purchase and the messaging. How is it resonating with the actual decision maker versus maybe the patient who is not aware of such a solution, or even perhaps maybe even interested in something like this in the first place.
So one of the exciting things about Hero is that we appeal to both of those populations, right? The patients themselves, as well as caregivers, and so that creates certainly a set of challenges in terms of how we create awareness of what we do, and how we target different approaches to storytelling. And we're up to that challenge. We've obviously taken it on, and it's been successful for us. What we've found is that there are countless ways to kind of engage each population, the patients themselves or the caregivers, but also speak to them in certain combined settings as well, so that the light bulb kind of goes off for them simultaneously. And so we had to learn all that, figure that out, and that was a big part of the first few years of our commercial existence once we launched. But again, going forward, as we think about the sort of future of what we do, we have multiple channels and ways in which we will create awareness for both those parties. But we will not necessarily have to be finding them just through our own sort of brute force, even though they're kind of highly customized brute forced efforts. And so, the narratives that appeal to those different populations are somewhat different, but in many cases, there's enough awareness between the two that there's a lot of overlap as well.
Super. So with that, I've been joined by Kal Vepuri, who is the CEO of Hero. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you so much, Scott. This was a pleasure. I really enjoyed this, and thanks for the time.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.